G'day everyone, it's Joe Sweeney here from Storyweaver Games, and we're going to start putting some rivers into our map. Now, I always put rivers in after putting my mountain symbols down. And the reason for that is that gives me a good understanding on how the rivers are going to flow out of the mountains and around them as well. Rivers, we all know, follow the rules of gravity. They flow down, unless you've got a magical river, in which case that's up to you what you do with it, but you need to explain that in your world. The other thing is that, and I do see this mistake on some maps on the internet, is that people think that maps sometimes confuse that rivers split. Very, very rarely happens, and only happens for very, very specific reasons. More commonly, rivers actually combine and they become bigger rivers. So you want to follow those issues. Now, the other less known thing about rivers is that they tend to flow east-west. They do flow north-south, but um, because of the basically rotation of the Earth, rivers have a slight tendency to be more east-west in orientation. Obviously, they won't flow uphill as a result of that. So when you're looking and thinking about placing your rivers, think about those basic geological concepts. We're also going to be putting some lakes into this map as well, and lakes follow pretty much the same principles. A lake will really only form when there is a large area that is a recession in the earth or a soft type of earth with slow flowing water. So we want to make sure that any lakes we put in there are basically in basins of some form or another. So that's it. That's the opening on rivers. Let's get to putting them onto our map. Now you do this using obviously what we call here the default river tool. Before I just click on that and start adding a river, I'd like to see what the options are. So if I right click on this here, you'll see that I've got different types of rivers. I've got a default river, which is the one that we'll start with, but we've also got narrow rivers, narrow fractal rivers, and so forth. By default in this setting, and in this environment, a, a river which is not marked as a fractal will draw a nice curved line. That's the style I want, but you can use the fractal to get rivers that are more jaggy. So let's start with a default river. Now, immediately brings up our little drawing tool. I'm going to create a river that flows in just across here, just a small one to show you how it's done. So I'm going to use the zoom tool to come on in. I'm going to place my river here. I'm going to move it around the outside of the mountains, a slight curve, and then bring it into the ocean area here. Now there's many ways of joining your river to the edge of your land. In this case, I'm just going to use it by eye because I'm zoomed in enough. So let's just click that there. When you're done with your river, you right click and bingo, there's our river. Let's redraw that and you can see that there's been a very slight shade put across that. That's absolutely perfect. I'm also going to have another river come in from here and join this river at this point. Now, I don't want a big thick river that I've got flowing from this old volcano. I want a thinner river. So I'm going to right click on the river tool and I'm going to select river small. In fact, river narrow is probably the better one. Starting from here, come on down, come on down. Now, you see how eyeballing that, getting that river just to connect there is going to be tricky. That's because, quite frankly, my eyesight, and I think even if you were to zoom in by rolling, I'm zooming in this time by rolling the mouse scroll wheel, I could probably do an okay job, but it's tricky. The good news is that there's a wonderful set of tools here called, this is endpoint. This one is on, and that's one we want. We want to make sure that this endpoint of our river is on and it point on the other river. So just to quickly go through those, endpoints will snap the river line or snap the line that you're joining to the endpoint of whichever other line that you're connecting to. This one will place it in the middle, the midpoint. So this is the one that we want here, which is the on command. And when we click on that, on, that means that it will attach the point that we're drawing to another entity, in other words, to this river here. So I'm just going to click on that, and you can see that it snaps to that point. And then I'm going to right click to say done. So now we can see we've got a finer river connecting to this larger river. Let's redraw that. Absolutely perfect. So there are times when you can just use your eye to connect, and there's other times when you want to use this on modifier command to really get some accuracy. Let's create another river now. I'm going to start here. Now, because we've got the previous drawing tool still selected, it's still in memory, we're going to start with a narrow river, and there's a reason why I'm doing this. I'm only going to draw it out to here. So now we've got this tiny little narrow river, but I want it to widen at this point because I'm going to have another river coming in from this angle, and I want it to join right on the end of that line. So I'm going to use this modifier, end point, click on that line just roughly. You notice how it jumped to the end point there? Because it knows, and then right click. So now we've got two small rivers that are going to join, and you guessed it, we're going to join them up to a wide river. And we'll make sure that the wide river connects to the end points of our two rivers by using the endpoint modifier. And we'll drive this one all the way to the ocean. I'm going to make it come onto this point here. So I'm going to use the point selector. Bingo, done. So you can see you can use a river just naturally to draw a single river line across there. You can use smaller rivers and then connect them into a point of a large river. You can have two rivers come together to a point and then add a larger river to move out of them. Now that little level of detail doesn't look great up close, but look what happens when you pan out. It gives you quite a realistic, natural feeling to your map. And that's really important. You want those rivers to give life to your map because let's face it, they're where the civilizations are going to come from. So that's how you add rivers to your map. Let's now look at creating another river and then I want to put a lake in here, and I want to put my lake in here. I'm going to zoom in so I've got a little bit more control of what I'm doing. So now what I wish to do is draw a river that comes from this open area in here where there's basically volcanic ash and mud and so forth. It's going to be a really nasty looking river. We're going to change its color in a short while, but it's going to come down through this valleyway here and then open up into a lake. There's going to be some fresh water coming in from other sources into a lake, which is here, and then it's going to flow to the ocean. So that's going to give us, again, a really interesting mixing of the water and the ash and so forth. It's going to be fascinating. But when I start this job, I'm going to purposely make an error because I want you to see something that's very, very important to comprehend. I'm going to click on the Rivers tool, right click to bring up the menu. And I'm going to go Small River. And I want you to watch what happens to this little button down here when I click this small river. You see how that is now marked to attach? That command has been automatically set because Campaign Cartographer is assuming that this river is going to attach to another shape. But because I'm drawing inside here, you see how it's jumping and attaching to things it really shouldn't be attaching to? So that's a problem for us. That attach button really should not be being set in this particular situation. So I use the undo key to get rid of that. However, if I select the narrow lake, that attach button does not get set. So now when I draw my river, it just draws exactly where I want without thinking about what other shapes exist. Okay, you got that? Excellent. Now, I also said that I wanted to make this river a darker, muddier color because it's coming in from this area. Actually, I'm just going to put one more little river in there. And I want that to come into that point. So I'm going to use my on modifier and drop it onto there. Excellent. Okay, now you remember how I said I wanted to change the color of these two rivers to be sort of like a darker browny color because there's lots of ash in them coming from those volcanic activity. To do that, we're going to use the change properties command. And I'm going to walk you through this in quite some detail. It's the first time we've used the change property command, so it's important that we understand at least the very basics of it. So we're going to click on that. There we go. And it then asks you to select entities. These are things that we're going to change. You can change more than one thing at a time. So currently we've got nothing selected. So if I move my mouse here and I click on that river, I get one entity selected. If I click on this river here, I get two entities selected. Now, while I'm doing this, I want to show you what happens if you make a mistake. What would happen if I accidentally also selected that mountain? And that could easily happen when you've got things which are overlapping very slightly. We've now got 3 entities selected, but I don't want to select that. The way that you unselect something as part of your selection is you hold down the control key and you reselect it. And you can see that it stops being highlighted in pink, although there is still this pink box around it. But you can always check you've got 2 items selected there. Once you're done with that, you right click and it brings up this menu here where you can modify your selection. Now, we're not going to get deeply into modifying selections at this point. We're just going to look at these 2 options here. Do it, which will mean you start to commit a change to those selected items, or cancel, which means you want to stop doing what you're doing and start again. We're going to select do it. Once you do it, it will bring up the properties that you can modify and change. The first is that we need to change the line style to being solid. And that is because the actual fill of that line that we had before is not solid. It was actually a special fill pattern. It was a graphical pattern. But we're going to make it solid. The fill style, we'll also make that solid as well. And then we're going to change the color. And we're going to make it a dark, sort of muddy, greeny color. I think that one's a good one. Click on OK. You don't need to change anything else. This will only modify the properties that have got tick marks on them. If we click on OK, you can now see that we've got this lovely, dirty looking river coming through there, which is exactly what we wanted. Now, let's go and put in a regular river. I'm just going to go for a normal, everyday default river. I'm going to run it in from up here. And we'll lock it into there. And I'm going to use a narrow. There we go. And we'll use the on command to fasten it onto there. There we go. So, and I might take another one from in here as well. Excellent. That probably means we need to put a mountain in here, or a small hill, so that the river has a reason to flow in that direction. To do that, I'm just going to grab that hill, and I'm going to whack it right there, and maybe a little cavey one here as well. And then I'm going to modify the size of that. Just give a little bit more definition in that space there. Excellent. So now there's a reason why that runs through to here. Okay, so we've now got our rivers coming into the area where we want our lake. Let's now go to our command here and select river lake. And starting at the end point of this lake, connecting onto the end point of this river, connecting onto the endpoint of this river, and then coming in and around, and finally connecting to the endpoint there. Done. So there you go. We have an interesting looking lake in between this volcanic activity. And finally, we're going to have a default river that runs from that lake. We'll select the on command to make sure it's nicely fixed. And we will run this one all the way down to our ocean. Let's zoom out and take a look at what that looks like. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go into speed mapping mode. You have now learned everything you need to know about laying down rivers and lakes for yourself. I'm going to finish adding all of these to my map. Feel free to watch this, it'll only take a few more seconds, and then we're going to come up and wrap up this lesson. Okay, so now you can see I've laid down all of the lakes in this map, and I've really gone to town with it. So you can see this particular land has got a lot of water, which is great. I mean, big tall mountains, lots of weather patterns hitting them are going to give us lots of rivers and lakes, so fantastic. Your job is to now go to your map, take a look at where your mountains are, and think about how your rivers are going to flow. Then what I want you to do is start with narrow rivers coming out of the mountains, join some of those together, and then use the endpoint modifiers and the midpoint modifiers to attach slightly thicker rivers and take them all the way down to the coast, and then use again that on modifier to connect those rivers to the coast. Have a play. Try also that using the change properties command to change the color of some of your lakes, just to add a bit of variation to the map and a little bit more world building. So you go off and do that. Once you're done with that, please let me know how you're going. If you come to www.facebook.com/storyweavergames, you can drop me a personal message there. Actually, drop them publicly, because if you've got a question, the chances are a lot of other people have got the same question. So please, let's use that as a great way to have a bit of a forum around these maps. Please send me examples of your work in progress. I'll be more than happy to comment and give some tips. My goal here is to make sure that everyone is creating beautiful, beautiful maps.